Welcome back to Off Ball Takes. This is your host, RB Laws, and this is my co-host.
For Wells.
We appreciate all the support in the recent content. And before we do get started, please don't forget to like and subscribe and follow us on Instagram and TikTok at the OBT Podcast for more content and updates.
Yeah, so obviously, another week of the NBA gone through, and the Cleveland Cavaliers still without a loss. They are 15-0 to begin the season after their 128-114 win over the Cleveland Cavaliers. Donovan Mitchell did not play in this one, but it didn't matter, right? You ended up getting contributions from pretty much everybody, Ty Jerome stepping in, and that's kind of been the story of the Cavs this season, where pretty much everybody on the roster, by and large, is playing very well. I mean, obviously, like I mentioned, Mitchell was out, but you have Evan Mobley averaging 19 and 9. I mean, you got Jared Allen basically putting up his numbers, 15 and 11, right? Darius Garland having a major bounce back year, right, averaging 21 and 7. So I mean, this team is pretty much clicking on, all cylinders. I mean, you look at their offensive rating, number 1. And then you look at their defensive rating, 8th, but that's okay because they are the number 1 offense. And funny enough, that had been their problem by and large, because they had been a good defensive team pretty much since they've acquired Donovan Mitchell and they've had this group of guys together. But the offense was kind of, up and down. But also second best in net rating, right? 11.5, right? So they've been getting it done pretty much on both ends of the floor. So, I mean, what do you kind of attribute this to? Because obviously we know that they did, make a coaching change, but it is kind of funny because, by and large, coaches usually don't have the reputation of being able to, make a huge difference, right? Like obviously at the NBA level, the main reasoning behind the success of the team is your roster, like your collection of players. But we have had some teams that have been able to kind of have a turnaround, and some of that is attributed to the coaching. But with this team, they didn't really make any significant changes to the roster. So, what are you kind of seeing from this team that kind of screams out to you that this might be a different team from last year? Because they've been a good regular season team, but they haven't gotten off to a start like this. I mean, the only other team that's had a start this great is the 73 win Warriors. That because they started off 24-0.
Yeah, I mean the thing that I kind of look at this team and see is similarities to last year, especially statistically in terms of like shooting percentages, stuff like that. Defense is arguably the same. But like you said, it's the offense. The offense is really, really potent, and it's definitely a system switch up because if you look at what they did last year, a little bit stagnant at times, a lot more isolation. Definitely, some interesting aspects where you bring in, involving Jared Allen and Evan Mobley, but now it looks fluid, and I think they've really taken a page out of Boston's book with the off-ball movement. Everybody's kind of scattering. They're creating so much motion that I think it kind of scares people and definitely tricks the opponent a lot because there's so much off-ball stuff going on. And I think also another thing that you kind of do have to factor in is Darius Garland has learned how to play off the ball magnificently alongside Donovan Mitchell and vice versa. It's a 1-2 punch combo that I don't think a lot of people thought could work. We still have yet to see it really, I guess, come to fruition in the playoffs, and that's kind of like the main question. But as a duo, they've been feeding off of each other perfectly. Even the rotational guys, the amount of swing passes are insane. Like I said, a lot of movement. Evan Mobley also being a big factor because I think he's like kind of like the median where you kind of look at him. He's doing a lot more ball handling, shot creation, passing. So overall, kind of honing his true potential, I think, because we knew that he could be an all-around star versus, kind of just some defensive anchor here and there. So overall, a lot has changed. The young guys have gotten better. The system is completely different, and everything's kind of going on the up and up alongside Kenny Atkinson and the amazing adjustments that he's made. Definitely no more stagnation on the offensive end.
Yeah, I mean, you look at, some of the more traditional offensive numbers. I mean, number 1 in field goal percentage by a decent amount. They're averaging 52% from the field, right? No other team is even at 50%, right? The next closest is the Knicks at 49.6. Number 1 in 3-point percentage, right? 42% from 3. as a team. So, like you said, kind of taking a page from the Celtics playbook in terms of spreading the floor with the 3-point shooting, but they have the addition of more size, right, in the front court. Obviously, like with the Celtics, you have the wings, and obviously Porzingis is, super tall, but for the Cavs, they have the two bigs, the two, guys that are basically, well, I mean, Jared Allen's not 7 feet, but, he does play like a 7 footer, and
Mm-hmm.
Mobley's 6'11. A lot to like, honestly, from the Cavs so far. It's just the main question, like you said, is, we have yet to see what this is going to look like once they actually hit the postseason, because obviously 2 seasons ago, they went out in the first round, then they went out, in the second round last year, right? They got out of the first round, lost in the second round to the Celtics. So the question is, can they get any further, right? And, again, with the way the East has been so far, it's definitely possible, just because, teams like Philly and Milwaukee are kind of behind right now, right? And, we've talked about them many times where, in the standings, it's tough for those teams because of the fact that, they started the season off so poorly. Those teams have a lot of ground to make up. I mean, like, the Bucks just lost the other day, as did the Sixers, right? So, I mean, for them, it's a little bit tough, but for Cleveland, they've already put in the work to get there. So it's kind of smooth sailing for them, right? Like at this point, they've obviously, like, nothing's clinched through the first 15 games, but it's very clear that so far, they've been an excellent team. It's just a matter of, will this work in the postseason? But if you can get some of this to transfer over, then, you have a shot. It's just going to be tough because Boston still, I think, looms large, even though they don't have the number one record because they've already done it before. But, Cleveland looks legit this time.
Yeah, for sure. And, I know, like, numbers wise, some of the guys are like down. Like, Donovan Mitchell is not like having like a crazy career year, but that's kind of a good thing, in my opinion, because I think,
Yeah.
when you ask him to shoulder the load of a team entirely, I don't think that's the best situation that you could probably put him in. So, having these guys like really show that they could be great supporting pieces around him is really, really cool, because I didn't think it could be done. Like, I was high on their offseason because I like the fact that they brought in a coaching change. And that's kind of what you want when you have a solid group of guys, but they haven't really been able to get over the hump in, 2 or 3 years together or whatnot. The first thing you kind of do look at is the coach. And then from there, you would make adjustments and so on and so forth. So, them kind of running it back, bringing in a new coach, changing up the system is definitely like, kind of like the main thing that I think you can attribute to their massive success early in the season.
And, again, if you're going to maximize this team, you have to get the most that you can out of everybody. And, you did have some guys that weren't quite as good last season, right? Like Garland, as we mentioned, wasn't as good. A lot of that can be attributed to the health issue, right? With the broken jaw. But, he's looked good. And like you said, all these guys playing well helps, because you don't want Mitchell to have to average basically like 30 a game just for
Yeah.
them to be kind of competitive, right? Because you had a couple of playoff games last season against Orlando, right? Because that was before all their guys started kind of dropping out of the postseason due to injury. And Mitchell kind of had to do, his best impersonation of, like a Bulls Celtics Jordan performance, right? Where, there's not a whole lot around him, and he kind of has to find a way to be able to single handedly do it. And you just can't, because
Yeah.
you're going against, a team that's just deeper. So shout out to the Cavs for the start they've had this season. And, you just kind of wonder how long can this keep going, right? Because I mean, they're your pick to win the NBA Cup. So, if they're gonna pull this off, they're gonna need to kind of, win these games, and especially win them by decent margins so they can have the advantage in the later rounds.
Yeah, and it's like I'll pose a question. Do you think that they can keep it up? Because I personally think that they can. It's just gonna have to be they can't deviate from the strategy. Like I said, they're going to have to continue to doing the great things that they're doing, the drive and kick opportunities. And the amazing thing is, like, they're generating a lot of open shots because of that movement. So as long as they don't revert back to stagnation, I think they'll be able to keep it up, because I think their defense is going to hold up. And like you said, even like to bring in a guy like Jared Allen, I know we didn't talk about him too much, but a lot of people thought he was going to get traded. So,
Yeah.
if he continues to be the efficient above the rim, guy that he is, while also, being a great complementary piece to Evan Mobley, defensively, I think they have a shot to, continue this win streak.
Yeah, I mean, they've already won 15 in a row. So, I mean, I think they've kind of at least shown that they have the ability to, be able to kind of keep this going. It's just like you said, it's just a matter of, can they not start to have multiple guys out due to injury, right? That are their key guys. Because I think you need at least a couple of those guys, right? Like you don't want to be down three, of those, 4 or 5 main guys, because that's kind of a problem because all of those guys are big time contributors for the team. So I think because of what we've seen on both ends of the floor, they should be able to, right? Because like, it'd be one thing if they were really good on one end, but not so great on the other end. But the fact that they're top 10 in both and they're number one in offense, I don't see a reason why it wouldn't. Obviously, people have talked about they've had some breaks because not every team they've played against has been that great,
Sure.
right? So, they're playing Boston, so the streak could end, right? And, we'll know not too long after this episode comes out, to see if the streak continues. But I think they can keep it going. It's just, again, they got to beat Boston. But even if they lose their next game, that doesn't make them frauds, right? I mean, like, because nobody expected them to be as good as they've been so far. So I think it's a testament to the changes that they've made that have been working. Like I said, I just want to see what this looks like in the postseason, right?
Yeah,
But so
agreed.
far, the fact that they're able to win all these regular season games will help them because they should be a top 2 seed pretty much by this point, unless they just have a horrible, stretch where they just completely collapse. You're going to have home court advantage, either as the 1 or the 2 seed. So that's what you want versus some of these other teams are going to have to sweat to get back to, just to get to like the 5 or 6 spot. So, and like the East as a whole, the records aren't great, but, Cleveland and Boston are the exceptions. So they're set. So I think, there's no real reason to kind of take your foot off the gas. You just got to stay healthy.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, so moving on, we did have some cup games, right? So, we can kind of talk about those somewhat just to kind of, check in on some of these and mainly more so kind of the most exciting, entertaining ones. So you had one between the Lakers and the Spurs. The Lakers ended up pulling it out 120 to 115, right? This was a very back and forth game. At the beginning of the game, right, the Spurs were kind of running away with it. I think they scored the first 11 or so points unanswered. And, it's kind of been a pattern with the Lakers, but by the end of the game, they were able to close it out. You had a number of performances by a number of key players. They had a starting lineup change, right? Because Rui was out. They started Dalton Connect, who's been really good in the last few games. You got a triple double from LeBron, but Anthony Davis continues to play, at basically an MVP level. I mean, he gave him 40 points, 12 rebounds, 2 blocks, and a steal. He's been shooting the 3 ball really well this season, right? Better than he has in a very long time because he's been one of the worst jump shooters in the NBA for the last several years. But this season so far, 43% from 3, only on 2 attempts a game, but he's been in the 20s, right? Pretty much, for a long time at this point. So it's kind of interesting to see, his jump shot being much improved from what it had been. And that's a big part of why his offensive numbers are going up because he was always good around the basket, but he had always kind of been a shaky jump shooter. But him being able to hit these shots, but also be willing to take them, especially in big moments, because some of these shots are coming late where it's kind of like, we need you to get these, we need you to hit these. And they're high pressure shots because he made a couple of threes to put this game away against the San Antonio Spurs. So, I mean, he's basically one of the league leaders in scoring, over 30 a game, double digit rebounds. And so, his performance so far this season is kind of the biggest reason why the Lakers are in the position that they're at, where, I mean, you're talking about them being basically 9-4, right? This is, if they've won 5 in a row after this Pelicans win. So this is the best start that they've had in quite some time, right? And again, like with LeBron, he's not putting up the crazy numbers that, we're used to him seeing, but he's still effective, in a lot of these spots, giving them 23, 8, and 9. The last several games, he's kind of been playing point guard because they've made their rotational changes with D'Lo being the backup guard, right? Max Christie, after kind of being benched, he's kind of come back and he's kind of given them some productive minutes. So, what are you kind of seeing from this team that's, I think, kind of a surprise? Because I think both you and I were not as low as other people were on LA in terms of, like, a lot of people thought that they would just kind of be one of the worst teams in the West, right? But I don't think we were necessarily quite expecting them to get off to the start they've gotten to, right? Like, I think we were kind of in the minds of solid team, but probably somewhere in the play-in versus, like, right now they've been playing like a top, 5 team in the Western Conference.
Yeah, I agree, 100%, where it's like I think this was a big surprise. And I think one of the factors was JJ Redick. I thought, like I wasn't sure what we were gonna get, and how he was going to adjust and what, kind of offense it was gonna be. But I've been thoroughly impressed with him, and I know, you're the Laker fan, so like I'm gonna rebound a question to you, once I'm done. But AD has been awesome, awesome, awesome. Like you said, MVP level, and it's his team now. I think we know that. LeBron obviously is going to be the physical leader, but in terms of the way that the team is constructed and the way that the team plays, and how the plays are drawn up, you can definitely see they're running through AD bearing threes over freaking Wembenyama, in the clutch. I mean that should kind of be the sign for you. And I think even like some complementary pieces have played slightly better. I think Cam Reddish has been pretty good on the defensive end, and I think that's kind of been something that's been overlooked a little bit. Offensively, he is what he is, but defensively, I think that could be something that kind of keeps him around a little bit longer. Who knows? AR, I think, has been fine. Like you said, Connect has been awesome. I think he's kind of been the spark plug that you needed, and for him to be inserted into the starting lineup is definitely a good sign because he's giving you productive minutes, and he's scoring the ball, which is something that the Lakers brought him in to do. But overall, yeah, very surprising start, but you definitely have to credit, I think, AD and JJ Redick. And my question to you was going to be, do you think JJ Redick has, surpassed some early expectations already? And like, what are your overall thoughts on him? Because I haven't really talked to you about like how you feel about JJ Redick through, the first 12 games for the Lakers.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, there are some checkpoints so far that it seems like he's passed, right? Like I think you kind of see, overall the system that he's kind of set up, right? Where, there's a lot of, like there are portions where there is movement, and it's not like there wasn't movement in Ham's offense, but it's the consistency. Now, to be fair, in some of these other games, there hasn't been quite as much of that, but some of
Sure.
that is just like, because they're playing a lot through their superstar guys, right? But you still have the thing where they're putting a lot of confidence into some of these guys. I mean, I think for him also the fact that he's kind of willing to go away from certain things and kind of shake stuff up, right? Because say like for Ham, you might have a criticism where like he did kind of shake up the lineup, but there were points where it might have been a little bit too late, right? Like, and obviously like for Redick, he's got to start with that starting five, from last season that won them a bunch of games, but kind of making these adjustments, like say like D'Angelo Russell, you're going to the bench, right? Because we kind of probably need your offense for the second unit because the second unit offense has been really spotty. And from the start, he was putting the ball more in Austin's hands, anyways, and he's having a really good year, and he's meshed very well with LeBron and AD. And like you said, right, like Dalton Connect, his minutes were kind of spotty earlier in the season, but that's kind of what you expect, right, from a rookie, right? Where it's like he kind of has to earn his minutes, and now he's gotten the opportunity to get more, right? Going away from Max Christie after he was given the opportunity and then just didn't really play that well. But now that guys are hurt, he came back, he put him in, and he has kind of rewarded him with some solid moments, right? Obviously, they got some other injuries to the front court as well. So I do think that's kind of where, you like seeing that. And it seems like the players seem to like him and trust him a lot, right? Because, like, say for D'Angelo Russell, sure, he's not very happy at all coming off the bench. And there's still moments where you can kind of tell where he's, like a little, I'm sure, like kind of taken out of the game.
Sure.
But just in general, right? Like, it just seems like I'm a little bit more surprised at how cohesive it's been, just because, and I know you have LeBron and AD as a good starting point, but you just kind of assume that some of the issues that a rookie coach would have, he'd have more of. But obviously, it's still early in the season. But I do think he's been better than I thought, because I think both you and I think we just weren't really sure what to expect. Like
Hmm.
we've obviously heard him on podcasts, so we kind of know what type of knowledge he has in terms of basketball, but it's still different when you're a head coach because there's other factors too. You have to be a communicator, you have to be a leader, you have to be able to, kind of also take cues from, assistants and things like that. So there's other factors beyond just the X's and O's, but
Yeah.
it seems like so far, it's been, he's been putting it together. And again, like I just think it's, when you win, obviously everybody's happy anyways, right? Like if the record was flipped and they were like 4-8, it'd be a major problem. But I actually do think he's been so far through the first, you know, 12 games or whatever, 15 games of the season, he's been good. And I think, like I said, that's part of it. Because again, it's basically the same roster as last year, aside from a few guys kind of swapped out, right? Like it's not Torian Prince, it's Dalton Connect, right? It's not Spencer Dinwiddie. But like everyone else is there, right? So I mean that's kind of the main thing. So that's where, it's nice to see them get off to a hot start because they need to, right? Because we talked about it where it's very difficult to be able to start off slow and then turn it on late and expect to make a deep run, right? And for
Yeah.
them, like, I think they know and understand that the roster is currently constructed still isn't good enough to be a contender, but you want to be able to win all these games now so that way you can give yourself a cushion, and so that way if that time comes where they actually do make a deal and possibly improve the roster, then you're in an even better spot. Because what you don't want is a situation like it's been where they've basically been stuck in the play-in, kind of hoping and waiting for a trade, and then either it doesn't come or it does come, but it's kind of like really late in the season. So, I think you got to give him his props so far. So, I mean, that's kind of the way you have to look at it.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, honestly.
So, I mean, yeah, I mean, it's definitely been surprising because, like I said, I think both you and I thought that they were capable of winning games, just not at the pace that they've been winning them. And then obviously, like, we don't have to really say a whole lot about the Spurs, but like, for them, I think they have been a little better than you might have thought, right? Like they've got some young guys that have been playing well. Obviously Wemby's, Wemby, but again, for them, it is kind of tough because it's still a young team. There are some vets on this team, but there's still some holes there. But I do like some of their younger guys. Like I like Stephon Castle a lot in terms of what he's been doing, and he's gotten some opportunities since Vassell, has just come back from injury. But obviously this is mainly kind of about the Lakers.
Yeah, I mean, with the Spurs, Wemby's been heating up. I will say that he looks, a lot more comfortable, than earlier in the season. The
Still too many
3-point
threes.
shot. What'd you say?
Still too many threes.
Agreed. Yeah, that's exactly what I was gonna say. Way too many threes, and it's like sometimes with these tall players, you kind of wish that they would, maybe realize that they don't have to play, like a 6'3" point guard. They're this guy's what 7'3", 7'4". So honestly, that is a little annoying at times. But hey, he's still putting up big time numbers. But yeah, he's looked a lot better, and like you said, the role players and the young guys are looking, a little bit more solid. It looks like more of a cohesive team, and I think that is somewhat attributed to Chris Paul. I know he hasn't been like, a superstar by any means, but I think he's brought, a certain level of stability to that roster and that offense that has made them look slightly better than last year.
Yeah. And then, just one more point about the Lakers before we move on. Number 5 in offensive rating, which is really good. And then obviously defensively, 26 in defensive rating. So, bottom 5 defense, top 5 offense, which is kind of what it was the latter part of last season, where like they turned from a defense team that couldn't really get it done on offense to an offensive team that couldn't really get it done on defense. So, just kind of interesting. And we've talked about what they need because we know the type of things that they need, right? They need some athleticism in the backcourt, some defensive guys, on the interior and on the perimeter.
Need Vando back, man.
Yeah, and that's the thing is like, unfortunately, he hasn't played it all. So that's kind of, I think, why you're seeing Reddish out there.
Yes.
Because he's not the same as Vando, but he is a guy that can defend. And like that's the main thing that he does out there. So
yeah.
But yeah, exactly. But moving on. Now we're going to another game involving a couple other teams in the Western Conference. You have the Minnesota Timberwolves and the Sacramento Kings, right? So this was a game that was going on at the same time as that Mike Tyson Jake Paul fight. And it was funny because I didn't really watch the fight, but it was funny because at the time
you wouldn't want to.
Yeah, but at the time, at one point the Wolves were up by 20 points, right? Like at one point this was a blowout. I mean, they were kind of running away with it against the Sacramento Kings. And then things changed. Somehow in the second half, De'Aaron Fox flips a switch, winds up dropping 60 points. Now, unfortunately, they lost in overtime. So even though he had a great performance, obviously it's not his fault. But he had a great performance, but they still ended up losing the game. Now, to be fair, you're talking about no DeMar DeRozan, already without Malik Monk. So it is a shorthanded Kings team. Sabonis, I guess, ended up getting hurt in this game because he didn't play in the next one that they played against the Jazz, and they ended up winning. But 22 of 35 from the field, 6 of 10 from 3. So you're talking about 60% from the 63% from the field, 60% from the line, 90% from the free throw line, 7 assists, 3 steals, a block, 6 turnovers, plus minus of 1. But again, not really his fault. You could tell he kind of ran out of gas by the end of the game. And it was funny because initially Wolves were looking really good after a couple of really horrible losses to Portland where they just looked awful. Then somehow, like I said, they fell apart in the second half. It looked like they were getting ready to find a way to choke this game away. And then they ended up pulling out in overtime. So it ended up being a nice win for the Wolves. They actually had a couple of, consecutive wins, right? Because they had the win over the shorthanded Suns where Julius Randle hits a step back 3 at the buzzer, interestingly enough. But, again, kind of just a kind of a wild situation for Minnesota because what looked like a potentially disastrous stretch of games ends up being not too bad, right? Where it's like you lost 2 games to Portland, but you did make up for it by getting the wins against Sacramento and Phoenix, right? You took advantage of the situations those teams were in. It just also would have been nice to take advantage of the Portland situation, which again, how about Portland too as well? Because they've won a couple of games. But, what are we seeing from Minnesota? Because again, 6-4 in the last 10, but there are still times where I watch this team where I still kind of almost want to throw something at my TV. But at the same time, to be fair, Edwards has been awesome, and Randall's also been very good.
Yeah, I mean the duo, like you said, has been awesome. To see this version of Anthony Edwards was not what I was expecting. I thought we were just going to see a more efficient guy, better at playmaking and stuff like that. But the aggression that I've seen from him from the 3-point line and showing his skills as a jump shooter is pretty freaking cool. And then Julius Randle coming into the fold and, bringing his scoring ability and his isolation and his ability to kind of be a walking mismatch at times has been awesome to see as well. Granted, I don't like to see them play, a team like Sacramento when they're kind of banged up like this and, they're just squeezing by in overtime, but a win is a win. The thing that I'm not liking is pretty much everybody on the freaking supporting cast. McDaniels, for some reason, I understand, he has a lot of tough assignments because, he's pretty good defensively, but this season has been very underwhelming in my opinion for some reason. Cannot stay out of foul trouble. I think it's likely probably due to the assignments that he's, having to deal with night in, night out and the load. Naz Reid, I think, has been solid, offensively and what he's been able to bring. But DiVincenzo, Mike Conley, Gobert, even in my opinion, I mean, they're just not bringing enough to the table to make me think that this team has a real shot to get out of the West. But, in this game specifically, Anthony Edwards, kind of once again just shuts everybody up and, closes the game. But overall, it's really the supporting cast that kind of irks me. It's not really Edwards or even Julius Randle because I thought going into this season, post Towns trade, I thought I was going to be screaming at Julius Randle through the television, but that has not been the case.
No. And it's funny because you look at Minnesota through 14 games. They are 8th on offense, which again is better than last season, right? Because they were not a top 10 offense last season. And then defensively, they are 11th. So big jump in offense or decent jump in offense, but a decent decline defensively because they were the number 1 defensive team and now they've dropped to 11th. And then, by net rating, they're 11th in net rating. So like they're just borderline a top 10 team. But that wasn't the case last season, right? So that's, I guess, again, the trade-off is you're a better offensive team, but not as good defensively, but you're not like a bad defensive team. But, some of these games, there's been so many weird swings because, like, you had a game where I think they destroyed Portland by, like, 50,000 points. Sure. And then back-to-back games where they got blown out by Portland. And then a couple of games where they've, kind of, like you said, snaked by Sacramento and Phoenix. And like, that's why net rating is a little bit tough, to kind of truly look at in the early part of the season, because 1 or 2 games can drastically alter a team's net rating. So like, if you have a bad week, you could completely drop, in the standings or, in the net rating and offensive rating and things like that. But I don't know. But like you said, it is weird because the record is good. it still isn't quite, I don't think, where you would like it to be. I mean, given the fact that they were a top 3 team in the Western Conference last season, and right now they are 7th, and they could have very easily been, like in that 9-10 spot had it not been for a couple of these close games that they won. But, to be fair, last season they had a problem closing out games at times. I mean, in the playoffs, it worked out fine until they got to the Mavs, but, so far it seems like in these crunch time games, their main guys have stepped up, which I think, like you said, is what you want to see. Is just, I think you're still kind of hoping and waiting for some of the supporting cast to show up. And I think if they do, they will look better. Because I
Yes.
think, like DiVincenzo, I think he will play better. I hope that you'll get some better basketball from Jaden McDaniels. So I think that there's still some improvement on the way. And then also, like, Mike Conley has been, like, just not really there for most of the season, so that kind of hurts.
Hmm.
But, that's also helpful with bringing in Julius Randle because now, like, you have another guy that you can kind of run some offense through at different points in the game. So, I think, they're not like the record isn't where you would like it to be, but I think that they can be better. But I'm still not really sold on the idea of them coming out of the West
Yeah,
because I just
no.
don't really know what to expect from that supporting cast come playoff time. And I don't know if the fit offensively will look as smooth come the playoff time. It could, but I don't really know yet. But to be fair, the West has been so topsy turvy, anyways, where there's a lot of teams that are in the standings that are like how did they get there?
Right.
But on the flip side, the Sacramento, well, not on the flip side, but the Sacramento Kings, basically the same record. But to be fair for them, they have had some injuries because DeMar DeRozan now has been out for a few games with a back injury. I believe Sabonis has missed a couple of games. Malik Monk has been out for a little bit and is going to continue to be out. But they're still above 500. They've been able to find ways to win. And I mean, again, you look at offensive rating, 6th in offensive rating. But then even like on the defensive end, they're 13th. So it's like almost top 5 offense, right? I think they need to be top 5, but that's very close. And then still above average defensive team. So, that kind of tracks in terms of them, in terms of the record that they have. And they're 10th in net rating. So they've been a good team. But because it's the Western Conference, it hasn't amounted to a whole lot because, they're 8th. But obviously last season they finished, ninth? So, standings wise, not a significant improvement. But I will say these standings I think will change because I think some of the teams below them will move up. It's just a matter of can the Kings hold on and maybe kind of like take away somebody else's spot.
Yeah, and
But what do you think?
I actually like the big three that they have, or I guess if you want to call it that. But their three main guys like Sabonis, DeRozan, and Fox. I actually like the fit a lot more than I thought I was going to. Like I knew it was going to be a talent upgrade regardless from Harrison Barnes, but I think collectively they looked pretty good. It's kind of like the same thing as Minnesota, where it's like the supporting cast has not really, been on my good side. And in all honesty, like some guys have been pretty solid, but like you also said, they've been hurt as well. But and when you're hurt, you kind of are relying on guys that probably wouldn't get a whole lot of minutes normally, but some very underwhelming guys like Keon Ellis has been so for me. Kevin Herter, a little bit. Alex Len, yeah, no. Just in general, I've just been very disappointed in their depth. And I think that's something that they can definitely improve upon, come deadline. But I really want to see this team fully healthy.
Yeah, because that's the thing is that, you know, for the Minnesota game, like, yeah, it's kind of tough to be able to beat a basically fully healthy team
Hmm.
when you're down, a key guy, right? Like DeMar DeRozan is one of their best players. And like you said, the fit so far, all 3 of them have played pretty well. When you look at the numbers, that all 3 of those guys have been putting up so far. So that's kind of the nice thing, and that's nice how it's translated into, like we said, basically a borderline, top 5 offense, right? And
Yeah.
it's nice that defensively they do seem improved from seasons past. So when they're fully healthy, I think that they're going to be, we might have been a little bit underestimating of how good the Kings are. Not that we thought that they'd be horrible, but it's such a crowded Western Conference that how good are they going to have to be in order to make the playoffs? Because ideally, you don't want to be in the play-in. In the year they made the playoffs, they were the 3rd seed in the Western Conference, but
Sure.
I don't necessarily know if they're going to be able to be the 3rd seed this year, especially because you talk about the year they were the 3rd seed, they had basically no injuries to their squad. But now they've already had some key guys miss games. But, like you said, when you look at the big three, so De'Aaron Fox is giving you 29, 6, and 5. DeRozan's giving you 23, 4, and 4. And Sabonis is giving you 20 and 12 with 6 assists. And all of them are shooting above 50% from the field. And even Sabonis is giving you 40% from three to only 2 attempts a game. But both him and DeRozan are taking threes, and, they're making a decent clip of them, right? Again,
Mm-hmm.
less than 1 3 a game for both of them. But that's nice to know that, like, all 3 guys are willing to take, perimeter jump shots, which they're going to have to do in order to be able to make it work, since all those guys kind of prefer to do their work inside the 3-point line. De'Aaron Fox is only shooting 34.5% from 3 on 6 a game, but he's still shooting above 50% from the field, right? And he's still getting it done at the free throw line, right? Which last year he actually didn't really shoot that well. But like you said, some of these other guys I do think will need to play a little bit better. Like Keegan Murray has not shot the ball well. You already mentioned, like Herter, I mean, he's shooting 46 from the field, but 34 from 3. And that's most of his offense. So that needs to get better. And then obviously Malik Monk will need to come back healthy. So I think if those guys can come back, like if Monk can come back and Sabonis can come back, or not Sabonis, DeRozan, right? Then I think, this is a good team. It's just a matter of how good is it in this Western Conference. But I think the DeRozan addition is already, was paying dividends before he got hurt. It's just rough because at his age, it makes it more likely that he's going to miss some time. And that's the tough part for the Kings, where they had the benefit of being pretty healthy, but now they've had injuries. And so it's going to be a little bit tougher because they need some of these guys, I think, ideally.
Yeah.
And if they don't, like you said, they don't have like a ton of depth waiting on the bench in terms of guys that are kind of able to just slide in and kind of just not replicate, but just like kind of just provide support, right? Because
Yeah.
like off the bench, like you mentioned, Keon Ellis, Trey Lyles, I mean, that's essentially it. I mean, like, outside of that, like you mentioned, Doug McDermott, Jordan McLaughlin, Alex Len, not really a lot of guys you're kind of going crazy about. And Devin Carter, their 1st-round pick, is not playing this season pretty much and that hurts, right? Because that's a solid athletic guard you could have had in there, but he is a rookie. So I do like what I've seen from the Kings so far. It's just like you said, I wish they were healthy, but you can say that about so many teams right now. I
Yeah.
mean, that's
100%.
kind of the crazy part that we've seen from the NBA so far. It's just the amount of injuries and how it's kind of changed up some of these things, right? Like you look at even a team like the Phoenix Suns, right, where they were right at the top of the West, and then boom, Kevin Durant, Bradley Beal get hurt. Now they've lost 3 in a row, right? So, and now they're kind of, not that they're like, cratering, right? But they're getting closer to the rest of the pack in the Western Conference, where they were right there with Golden State and Oklahoma City initially to start the season, right?
Yeah.
And that's the tough part, is that injuries can kind of kill, a team season. So that's, and even with Memphis, right? Like, Desmond Bain had been out, just recently came back. Ja Morant, right? He's been out. So we don't need to go over all these because we did an entire podcast on all the injuries. But yeah, the Kings have fallen prey to this as well,
Yeah.
right? So we'll need to see, hopefully these guys can come back and then we'll see more of them. Because
Yeah.
like I said, I think some of these teams will be better once they're fully healthy. It's just some of these teams have gotten off to, I think, slower than expected starts, and we'll probably cover those as we, move into our, future episodes.
Yeah. 100%.
Yeah. So, I mean, not really too many news, and rumors to really speak of, because again, as we've talked about at this point, the NBA season is at a point where not really a lot of moves tend to be made at this point, because obviously December 15th is when you have, the first batch of guys that were signed that could be traded. So right now we're kind of just hearing mainly just noise, right? Like you've heard rumors about like, Houston possibly chasing after guys. But nothing concrete, right? Like it's the same stuff we've heard before. Like they're chasing after stars, they got the picks, and it would be cool if they were able to kind of come up with somebody. But I don't think anything's going to happen anytime soon. I think it would have to be a scenario where, as we've talked about, some disgruntled star is unhappy and wants out. Could it be Giannis? Maybe. We don't know. We have to see what the Bucks look like because we'll have to keep track of that situation. They've still been talking about Durant, even though the Suns have been better, right? So kind of weird, but again, for Houston, they should be chasing after guys. I just don't necessarily know how successful they're going to be at it right now. But if there is a guy available, they should be one of the favorites to acquire those guys because they have a lot of young players that I think some of these teams would be interested in taking a flyer on. Plus, they have picks. So I think they're one of those teams where I think if a guy was available, I would put them towards the front of the line. And they already have like a decent roster in place because they're winning games, right? They're actually one of those teams towards the top of the West, right? Where, obviously I know they started off good last year and then kind of tailed off, but still, so far they've looked, better than I think earlier in the season. But what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's because of their young pieces and how they've looked. In terms of like the guys outside of Jalen Green and Şengün. Like I'm not super duper duper high on Fred VanVleet. I,
Mhm.
Keeping it real, I think Amin Thompson should be starting in his place, but that's neither here nor there because I think he's been awesome. And I guess you probably don't want to shake too many things up considering the fact that you're winning a lot of games. Um,
Mhm.
Jalen Green's been solid as well. But they don't really have a clear cut star. So, like you said, I do 100% understand, like, going out and getting a bona fide superstar and trading away some young pieces because you have, some veterans and you'll, depending on what kind of trade it is, you'll still have, I'm hoping, some of those young pieces as well, like Reed Shepard, Jabari Smith, Şengün. Like, hopefully you'll have, at least, three of those guys on the team, Cam Whitmore as well. So, it's a perfect combination of young and old. I just think they're missing their number one option, and I think that would kind of solidify them as a top 5 team in the West.
Yeah, we'll just have to see,
Yeah,
what goes on. But as long as they keep winning, they have a lot of options.
yeah, because that's kind of like the Houston Rockets that I was hoping to see. Even like I know it's still early in the season, but super duper early. I thought they could have started off undefeated, but yeah, they started
Mhm.
off god awful.
Yeah. Well, that's it for today's episode of Off Ball Takes. Again, we're almost at the 20 game mark in the NBA season, right? By the time, the next couple episodes come out, we'll be at the point where we'll kind of have a decent idea of which teams are really good, which teams aren't, and then which teams are kind of in the room for improvement mode, and then which teams are in the Cooper flag mode, obviously. So, a lot going on. Again, the NBA Cup is still going on, so obviously we'll continue to cover that. And let us know in the comments your thoughts, right, on kind of all these stories and topics going around the league. Let us know your thoughts. If you leave a comment, we'll read it at the beginning of the video. Continue to like, comment, and subscribe so that way we can continue to grow our channel. We appreciate all the love and support, and we'll see you in the next episode.